5-year, $100 million deal with Korean food company Bibigo. The deal was amplified by a recent change in NBA rules that allow teams to include their logos in overseas business deals. As we welcome back Dave, does this deal open up the door for other international sponsors?
Well, certainly, but I don't know if the other sponsors and teams will be able to get the type of money that the Lakers were able to secure. I was at the event last night with Lakers senior president of business operations, Tim Harris, presenting the new jerseys to the Bibigo sponsors. Two things stand out. One, they convinced the Bibigo folks to take the green out of their logo on the Lakers uniform because you can't have Celtics green on a Lakers uniform. And two, actually the deal, I'm told, according to multiple sources, is worth upwards of $25 million a season, not the $20 million a season that was reported.
Big time money right there.
That's huge money. And I guarantee you it wasn't the only international, brand that was trying to get into the Lakers front door. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, that is a pretty valuable space right there on that jersey. Moving on, new Phoenix Suns center JaVale McGee had high praise for his 36-year-old point guard on Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay podcast. McGee said he's definitely going to lead us to the finals again. Hurt with CP3 coming off a wrist surgery and in his 17th season, can we expect the point guard to bring Phoenix back to the finals?
Look, I love the direction that Phoenix is going in with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton signing back CP3. But hell no. It's the Lakers coming out of the Western Conference. Yeah, I mean, they're too stacked. Like, the Lakers just have too much for them, too much experience, too much firepower, and Russell Westbrook to the thing. I just hate to say it because I love Monty Williams, but no, they don't have a chance.
You just went full, no disrespect, and it's just disrespected. Having said that, okay, moving on. Carmelo Anthony, he has been making the media rounds lately to discuss his new book, Where Tomorrows Aren't Promised, as well as his decision to sign with the Lakers. Or was it his decision? Melo joined Drew Barrymore to explain. Watch.
I almost got forced to do it.
Okay.
I almost got forced. I think LeBron forced me to do it.
Okay.
He waited to the right time. He waited to, we at the end of our careers. And he said, the time is now. If you don't do it now, we ain't gonna never do it. Early on, I don't think it would have worked out between us because he was on his path, I was on my path. We had different lanes. I just think everything happens for a reason, and timing is everything.
Melo's getting really comfortable on this media tour, isn't he? So LeBron, I guess, played his hand perfectly, and Melo is a Laker. Dave, now that he's in the purple and gold, what role should Melo have with the squad?
He should be Bill Walton on the Boston Celtics, who went to the Celtics and was once a contemporary and a competitor against a Larry Bird, considered the best in the game, but had a different stage of his career, won Sixth Man of the Year, and helped those Celtics teams win a ton of games. That can be Carmelo Anthony on the Lakers this year. Come in, play 15, 20 minutes a game, shoot the 40% from three that you did last year, and not only will that preserve him by not overextending him in the regular season, but it will not overextend the starters that he'll be replacing coming off the bench because the starters for the Lakers are old as well.
Well, I agree with you, Dave. I think Melo coming in off the bench, he could possibly be in the Sixth Man of the Year conversation because he would be featured, especially if he's on the court with a guy like Rondo. Melo still is a walking bucket. He's a guy that's going to be able to get a bucket until he's 60-something years old. And the thing is that he's going to fill that void that they wanted Kyle Kuzma to do last year. That's why Melo is there. And this is why I say that the Lakers are going to have the best bench in the NBA.
Perk from Houston and Woj joining us again in studio. And let's get into one of the more intriguing teams heading into this season. That's the Golden State Warriors. The Dubs announced Monday that Klay Thompson and James Wiseman are both still rehabbing from their respective injuries and won't be cleared in time for the season. Ramona Shelburne previously reported Golden State is targeting Christmas Day for Klay's return. Woj, what have you heard on what's next for Wiseman and the Warriors in his second season?
Cass, this is a player who last year certainly injury curtailed his season, his development. And you saw that this was a Golden State team that without him on the floor, when they were able to play kind of a small ball center, they were a much more effective team. And so I think it's just a process of integrating him into their system, him being healthy, having an off season of work. This is still a player they're really high on in Golden State, and he's got to be a big part of their future, or he needs to be a big asset for them if they go big game hunting in the trade market either this year or beyond.
Yeah, Perk, Golden State invested in not only Wiseman, but drafted Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga in the lottery just 2 months ago. Do you expect these young pieces to be developed or traded?
I think they're going to be developed. When you look at a guy like Moses Moody, when you watch the way that he carried himself, he fits perfect in this culture with the Golden State Warriors. Last year, I believe he made 160 of his made shots were off of spot-ups. And that's what they need. They need spacing right alongside Steph Curry, even when Klay Thompson get back. And then when you look at Kuminga, right, he played in the G League, was coached by Brian Shaw, so he knows what it takes. Both of those guys, to me, really impressed me in the Summer League, not just their skill level and their talent, but their IQ. And when you have leadership like Draymond Green and Steph Curry, guys that could bring you along and teach you the game, all you have to do is go out there and listen and showcase your skills. So I think they're going to fit well, and I think they're going to develop those young guys.
Yeah, Wiseman had surgery on April 15th for that meniscal tear, and they said they were expected to have him jumping 6 months from the date of surgery, which would be October 15th. And this is a team, if everything goes right for the Warriors, we could see them in the finals, or we can see them as a first-round exit. So it's going to be interesting. A lot of uncertainty around a team that used to be the picture of consistency for so long. Now, speaking of a new era, JJ Reddick announced his retirement this morning after 15 years in the NBA. 37-year-old Reddick played for 6 teams and ranks 15th all-time in three-pointers made. Reddick explained his decision and the next phase in his life on his podcast.
It's time for me to be a dad. It's time for me to reflect, pause, and it's time for me to get ready for the next phase of my life. I can honestly say it will be the relationships that I've built and the moments I've had with my teammates, the moments I've had competing against my peers. It's been a true honor to be in the NBA brotherhood for the last 15 years.
Woj, how will you remember Reddick's career?
Listen, JJ Reddick's college career, certainly at Duke, one of the all-time great shooting guards in college basketball history, in ACC history, and then a player in the NBA who really evolved his game from just being a spot-up shooter to a player that could help you in a lot of ways. And you look at the teams and the organizations that Reddick was a part of, whether it was Orlando with Dwight Howard, the Clippers with Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, Philadelphia, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. This was a player who, in difficult locker rooms with teams who had chemistry issues at times, was a player that management, the coaching staff, their teammates could really count on to bring stability, maturity. He played a great role beyond his ability to shoot threes. He was one of the best of his era on the court. But listen, this is a player who not only had a great career, he's got a very promising career off the court, whether it's in television, whether he decides to go into coaching or front office. And I think he's thought about all of those things moving forward.
Absolutely, Woj. And I would like to even take it a step further and say, I applaud any role player that wasn't a franchise guy or all-star caliber player that made it past 10 years in the NBA. We all know that the average years in the NBA is 3.5, 4 years. But when you start to hit over 10 years and JJ hitting 15, you overcame some serious odds. And one thing I know about JJ Reddick was that, one, he was one of the hardest working dudes to be around. I never played with him, but I heard nothing but great things about him. Like Woj said, he was an excellent teammate, and he's going to go down as being remembered as an ultimate competitor. Yes, we know that JJ Reddick was a spot-up shooter, a guy that knocked down timely shots, knocked down big threes and things to that nature, but he also competed at a very high level. Wasn't physically gifted to really do things, but at least he left it all out there on the hardwood. And when you ask any coach, from Doc Rivers to Brett Brown, anybody about JJ Reddick, they have nothing but great things to say about the way his professionalism and the way that he approached the game of basketball.
Yeah, and I think that's why he got a lot of jobs later on in his career, because he was a great veteran. He was meticulous with his work, and he set good examples. He said he's looking forward to retirement, spending more time with his family. He's shown, as you said, Woj, a passion for media with his podcast, The Old Man and the Three. And Woj, I heard that podcast is possible because of you.
Maybe my only NBA assist. In a previous incarnation, I talked to JJ about maybe writing for a website and writing for us. And he said, that seems too much like homework. I don't want to do that. And I said, what about podcasting? And he said, let me think about it. And he decided to do it. And I remember the first pod he did was with Steve Nash, I think shortly after Nash's retirement. And it was, this guy is not only is he a great shooter, he's a better shooter than we are, and he's a better podcast host than the rest of us too. And it's a must listen in the NBA. And so I think whatever JJ does moving forward, I think he's going to have success. He's got a natural curiosity about him. I thought it made him a great podcast host.
Absolutely. Look, we may not see him on the court anymore, but Hubbard, and we've got a show for you this Tuesday, including the latest on the drama around Ben Simmons as he makes a definitive statement on his future in Philly. We'll also hear from the Nets as they set their sights on their first NBA championship. Plus, JJ Reddick calls it a career. How will he ultimately be remembered? And the best needle-threaded passes of all time. Heads up, the jump starts now. Dave McMenamin and Kendrick Perkins will join us in just a moment, but we start with the next chapter of the Ben Simmons saga out of Philly. Adrian Wojnarowski joins us in studio. And Woj, what can you tell us about Ben Simmons and the latest with him in Philadelphia as training camp starts next week?
Cassidy, not only does Ben Simmons plan to not report to training camp, he intends to never play for the Sixers again, to not wear an NBA uniform until he's traded. And so that sets up now a standoff between the 76ers, who want him in camp, who want to start the season, improve his trade value, and Ben Simmons, who is essentially telling the Sixers now, I am willing to sit perhaps even out the season until you find a deal for me.
So this is a game of chicken, is what
Absolutely.
it really is. So let's go on from both sides. What are the options that the Sixers have right now?
Well, listen, you don't miss Ben Simmons until certainly the season starts and you start playing games. This was a team that was the number one seed in the East last year that has championship aspirations. They are a far diminished team without Ben Simmons. He knows that. And this is a bet by Ben Simmons that this is an organization with a win now mentality, Joel Embiid in his prime, that just is not going to allow this gaping hole in the organization to cost them a season, and that they'll find a trade for him.
Well, Simmons' trade value was at an all-time low heading into the summer. And when we think about him holding out a training camp, what are the repercussions that Ben is facing if he doesn't show and is not traded?
Not getting paid. And that's what makes this so unique, Cass. 4 years, $147 million left on his contract. For a player who's owed that kind of money to not show for training camp. And so it'll start with fines, missing media day. Missing the first practice, second practice. October 1st, he has a significant portion of his salary. And if he's not playing, if he hasn't reported, the Sixers don't have to pay him and almost assuredly won't. And so the Sixers are betting that this is a player ultimately who is not going to be willing to cost himself this much money. And again, they wanted to see if they could get that trade value up this season. Ben Simmons wanted the trade at the end of last season. Philadelphia talked about a James Harden deal back at the deadline, but when they couldn't get James Harden, they didn't see anything else really out there this summer that was available to them that made sense for a player at 25 years old of Ben Simmons' magnitude.
Other than Doc Rivers and the rest of the team having to answer countless questions, what leverage does Ben Simmons have in this situation?
If you're Ben Simmons, you're hoping that the Sixers get off to a bad start, and that there's a clamor to just get a deal done. And you're also looking at other teams in the league who maybe don't start out as well as they hoped. And then they become under pressure to find a deal to improve themselves. And maybe it's teams who've made offers, who improve their offers, or more teams get involved, and there have been a lot of conversations about not just two-way deals, but three-way deals, four-way deals to get all the assets moving, it is hard to trade a player of Ben Simmons' magnitude for a team like Philly when you're a championship contender. Usually great players like this, they're being traded from teams who are maybe headed toward a rebuild and they want draft picks and young assets. Philly wants an all-star level player back and then some assets. That's hard to do.
Daryl Morey has proven he's not willing to settle, but we will see as this continues to linger on. Obviously, a situation we will continue to closely monitor with Philly Media Day on Monday. Thanks, Woj. You'll be back a little later in the show with some more breaking news that came out today. But for more reaction to the news that Ben Simmons will not show up to training camp, let's bring in Kendrick Perkins and Dave McMenamin. And Perk, I'll start with you. This summer, you were one of the first people to say that you heard Simmons was willing to not report to camp. So what's your reaction to this definitive statement now a week away from camp opening?
Well, Cass, I'm not gonna go into the boasting and bragging and saying I told you so, but I'm gonna do it. I told you so. All right, that's the first thing. Second of all, here it is, right? I'm looking down the line in the future. And you know what? When the CBA is up, guess who's going to be waiting at the front door? Not the door, the door. It's going to be Adam Silver and the owners. Because here it is, right? And I get it. Ben Simmons won out. Philly trying to trade him. We don't know what's going to happen. I get all that. But my thing, why I'm disappointed in Ben Simmons is that you have a job. You have an obligation. You're getting paid a whole lot of money. It's guys before you that paved the way for you to make a lot of money. It's your obligation to uphold that so that other guys that come behind you could get paid the same amount of dollars and get paid a lot of letters. And what's going to happen is the next CBA, owners are going to come up, and this is the first thing that they're going to bring up. Hold on, we cannot be paying guys $150 to $250 million over 5 years, and they're not going to show up to work. And I'm all in for player empowerment, but at the end of the day, players got to make sure that they do their part and stay true professionals. That's the thing that I don't like about this situation is how Ben Simmons is handling it. I think he's being selfish, and he's not worried about nobody else but Ben Simmons. And you have to do your part because others paved the way for you.
Yeah, so basically you're saying it's not a good look all around. Dave, how do you think the threat of the fines changed Simmons' stance of not playing in Philly again?
Well, Cassie, obviously it wouldn't have got to this point unless they had already considered what would come in Philadelphia's response. And Adrian and Bobby Marks reported there's going to be close to $250,000 per game missed, potentially fined towards Ben Simmons. But on the back end of that is, what does Philly want? Does Philly want to recoup the salary they're going to pay Ben Simmons, or do they want to field a competitive team? And as Adrian mentioned, if they get off to a slow start, especially when they're in the East, where the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks are in their conference, you have the Brooklyn Nets, if they're healthy, you have the Miami Heat, who made their team better in the offseason, and you want to be a contender in Philadelphia, do you keep stomaching having him on the sideline while you aren't plugging something in for him and getting back into that Eastern Conference race? Or do you decide the long-term benefit is, hey, we will not trade, 2 quarters for $1? And this is the game that we're seeing play out right now. What has changed in the league, I think, over the last several seasons is this coming to a head when a player still has several years remaining on his contract.
Right.
In years past, it was, okay, it's the last year of the deal. Let's see if we can work something out because I'm going to be gone as a free agent. We've seen this with Jimmy Butler. We've seen this with Kyrie Irving. We've seen with Anthony Davis. With several years left on their deal, they're pressing the eject button.
Perk, as I mentioned with Woj, Ben Simmons' trade value was probably at its lowest coming out of those finals. Out of the playoffs, rather. And you're talking about how the mood around him, he just looks selfish. So how do you evaluate his trade value right now?
Obviously it's low, but look, Ben Simmons is still an all-star caliber player, okay? He did make the all-star team last year. He's still a guy in the right system that could go out there and give you 18, 7, and 7 a night. Right, he did lead the NBA last year in assisted three-pointers. So in the right situation, I think Ben Simmons will be just fine. I just think last year when you look at Ben Simmons, it didn't start in the playoffs. He lost his confidence throughout the season. And why I say that is because Joel Embiid was the guy that was featured. Ben Simmons was the guy that was being the facilitator. And when you play that way throughout the course of the season, you can't expect a guy like Ben Simmons just to turn it on at the drop of a dime, a guy that already lacked confidence in shooting the ball and being a scoring threat anyway. So at the end of the day, I think he still has a lot of value because Ben Simmons still is a guy that is young. He hasn't even touched his prime yet. So I think that Philly can get back some things, but they're just not going to get back what they want. And what they want is an MVP caliber player or an all NBA type player. And I don't know if they're going to get that.
And Dave, to your point on players holding out, we saw James Harden last year have a brief holdout at training camp. Then he showed up and kind of took a lax approach to playing, then ultimately got traded. But Ben Simmons doesn't have James Harden trade value, so we will see. Speaking of the Nets, we are 4 weeks from the regular season, and the Brooklyn Nets are the betting favorite to win the NBA title, according to Caesars Sportsbook. But the New York City vaccine mandate is affecting the Nets' ability to practice with a full roster, as Nets GM Sean Marks explained today.
I can't comment on whether who could play and so forth. There would obviously be a couple of people missing from that picture. I won't get into who it is, but we feel confident that, in the following, several days before camp, everybody will be allowed to participate and participate fully.
We now welcome in ESPN NBA reporter Tim Bontemps. Tim, thanks for joining us. And look, there's a new New York mandate involving vaccinations. How has that affected the Nets' ability to practice and squad?
Well, Cassidy, as you just showed with Sean Marks talking at this press conference a couple hours ago, the Brooklyn Nets are in the same situation that the New York Knicks are, in that as of last month, earlier this month, I should say, there's a vaccine mandate in New York City where anyone who wants to participate in any kind of workout in a private gym or in a gym, including professional basketball players who play for the Knicks and Nets, have to have at least one COVID vaccine shot or an exemption from the city that allows them to not get one. And as Sean Marks said today, there are multiple Nets players who are unable to practice if they had to practice as of today. Now, the Nets do have a couple things working in their favor. One is that they don't play their first home game until October 24th, which is well over a month from now. So that gives them some wiggle room to get a shot before get these guys a shot before they have to play in regular season games. The other thing is that for the first week of training camp, they're going to be in Southern California, in San Diego, holding training camp before they play a preseason game against the other Western Conference favorite to be in the NBA Finals, Los Angeles Lakers in LA. So they do have some wiggle room here to get their guys on the court. But certainly it's not a great sign, as you guys just spent time talking about Ben Simmons in Philly, that another title favorite in the Eastern Conference, the Brooklyn Nets, are looking at having some guys potentially missing time at the start of camp.
Not to mention the vaccine takes about 2 weeks to fully be in your system. So obviously that's something to closely monitor. Meanwhile, Kevin Durant signed his extension, but James Harden, Kyrie Irving have not yet signed theirs. What's the latest you've heard on the Nets' plans for both Harden and Kyrie?
Well, Sean Marks also talked about that. And first of all, he mentioned that both James Harden, who had a hamstring injury in the playoffs, as everybody remembers him limping through those final 3 games of the Eastern Conference semifinals against the Milwaukee Bucks, and Kyrie Irving, who had a sprained ankle and missed the final 3 games of that series, both are looking good physically and should be ready to go from that standpoint at the start of camp. And as far as extensions go, you're right. Kevin Durant signed a few weeks ago. He agreed to a 4-year contract extension, and both James Harden and Kyrie Irving are eligible to do the same, and so far have not. That being said, Mark said that he thinks that when he gets in person with these guys and has in-person conversations with them over the next few weeks, he feels optimistic about the fact that they're going to continue to be committed to this franchise as they have been over the past year, and that they see the same ability for the Nets to develop into a perennial championship favorite over the next several years, and along with their pal Kevin Durant, form what looks like a core of a team that is certainly going to be a force to be reckoned with in, at minimum, the East, if not the entire league, for at least the next couple of years, assuming they all stick together.
Just like last season, I have a feeling the news won't stop around this team. Nets Media Day is on Monday. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Cass.
All right, let's bring back Perk and Dave. And Perk, if you're a Nets player, how does missing players for significant portions of training camp affect Brooklyn's ability to start strong?
Well, I mean, when you're trying to compete for a title, you want to make sure that you still have a strong start and everybody intact from day one. And, they went through this last season dealing with injuries. And if they're going to miss players, you want to develop chemistry. And I think when you're trying to compete for a title, you develop chemistry from day one. When I was with the 08 Celtics and we won the title, the first day of training camp, we developed chemistry. I mean, our practice was so good that Doc canceled the next 2 days of practice. But that's what you want to have. You want to have guys together. You want to form that bond. You want to develop great habits and have great chemistry from the start of the season. Now, would it stop them if some guys are out? No, because they're that talented. They have Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving. But with that being said, them guys still all want to develop a chemistry with the new additions that they have with Paul Millsap, LaMarcus Aldridge, James Johnson, and then losing Jeff Green, Spencer Dinwiddie, Shaman. All those guys want to come in, and you got to have that chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, as you see, Sean Marks was busy this offseason, but this is the second year for that three-headed monster and the second year for Steve Nash in just his second season as a head coach. By the way, no Mike D'Antoni on his bench this year, who is now in New Orleans. What are your expectations of Steve Nash this year, Dave?
Yeah, no Ime Udoka also, and they added Steve Clifford, one of the most respected basketball minds there are around right now. But this will come down to Steve being able to manage the personalities of the big three, but beyond the big three. And now, certainly you look at his career and you'd suggest that he is someone who can do that. Those Suns teams that were known for him winning the MVP and racking up 60-win seasons, they were also known for him being someone who had connections to guys like Shawn Marion, who could be prickly at times, and Amari Stoudemire, and all the rest of the Raja Bells and the rest of that group that had so much success. There was a camaraderie and there was a connective tissue in that locker room. And he was there in Golden State with Kevin Durant. Listen, as much as we talk about the Nets' big three, the best player on that team is Kevin Durant. And he has a pre-existing relationship with KD. KD's coming off this excellent summer that he had winning the gold medal in Tokyo. And if Steve Nash can stay on the same page with KD, I think that goes a long way in terms of getting everybody else on board. NBA and the fact that he is joining a Lakers coaching staff that could potentially win a championship. But you also have to mention this moment. It would be just burying the lead had I not acknowledged that this happens. He's back.
John Lucas did himself. He acknowledged it on his Instagram. He said, man, it just hit me. I'll be coaching King James, the very man who jumped over me in a game. He going to have to make him do extra laps in practice for this? Should Bron have to run some laps?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Look, first of all, Bron gets no credit for jumping over 5'11" John Lucas, okay? Yeah, and look, I get it. The dunk was special and everybody was a good all. But look, if I'm John Lucas III, I'm going in and I'm hard on Bron from day one.
Or no, do we not remember that number 18?
So much.
All right, here's what the Jump recommends for today, the NBA rankings for the upcoming season. Go over to ESPN.com and check out numbers 100 through 51. Get your study on because we're breaking them down when we play Jump Ball after the break. Players 100 through 50 on ESPN's NBA rank today. We decided to bring back one of our favorite games, Jump Ball NBA Rank Edition. And first up, we have the two most recent number one overall picks in the draft. Anthony Edwards is ranked 52nd after a strong rookie season, and Cade Cunningham enters the list at number 76 before ever even playing a game in the NBA. So, Perk, who do you think has the higher ceiling in your eyes?
I really love Cade Cunningham. I think he's a complete all-around basketball player. But when we talk about Anthony Edwards, we talk about a guy that last year had 40 points on multiple occasions. I mean, dropping them spicy, teriyaki style, however you want it. He's a generational talent. And if the coaching staff put him in the right position to be successful, I'm looking at him as being a first-time All-Star this year. He's that good. So right now, when I look at who has the highest ceiling, I'm going with Anthony Edwards, the Ant-Man.
Burke, I agree with you completely. A bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. We've already seen Anthony Edwards compete at an NBA level, at a very high NBA level, particularly in the second half of his rookie season. He was making nightly appointment viewing to see what he was going to do. He can splash threes, as we saw in this offseason, with ease from almost half court, making it look like a free throw. And obviously the explosive hops are incredible. And with this new coaching staff, I think he'll have a chance to be put in the right spots to succeed. And so I'm going to stick with Anthony Edwards, but I'm still excited to see Detroit this year too.
Perk, I agree with you too, but I like my teriyaki more sweet than spicy. Just letting you know that. Next up, we have some point guards in new places. Knicks guard Kemba Walker is ranked at 70, while Wizards guard Spencer Dinwiddie comes in at 68. Dave, who will be the better point guard this season?
Again, I stick with the guys that I've seen do it already, and I've seen Kemba Walker play on a big stage, both at UConn, obviously with Charlotte, where he was one of the greatest players in franchise history. Obviously, the knees didn't let him be the player he's been in the past in Boston, but I think there's a new situation for him. He loves playing at the Garden. I'm going to go with Kemba. Spencer, really hasn't played in big games yet in his NBA career.
I mean, but Dave, he's played in meaningful moments and meaningful minutes, and he's delivered when it mattered the most. And we got to remember that before this big three, KD, Kyrie, and all those guys were formed, Spencer Dinwiddie actually was the head of the snake of this organization. I'm actually going with Spencer Dinwiddie. I think he's going to get more of an opportunity. He's going to have the ball in his hands more. I could see him playing 30-plus minutes. It's going to be the Spencer Dinwiddie and Bradley Beal show. Spencer Dinwiddie is a guy that is capable of going out there and giving you 25 and 5 a night. And when I look at him coming off this ACL injury, he looks in phenomenal shape. Like I've been seeing his IG and his Twitter posts, I'm expecting big things out of him. They paid him a nice contract to come in and deliver, especially after losing Russell Westbrook.
And there's going to be a lot of attention on Kemba back home and the Knicks. But I just found out producer Steve has given up on the Knicks, and I don't know what is.
Wow.
I don't know what's true anymore in this world. We'll move on. You can call him after the show, Perk. All right, now we have a pair of players named Bogdanovich. Bojan of the Jazz is ranked 67th. Bogdan of the Hawks is ranked 64th. Perk, who is the better Bogdanovich in your eyes?
I'm going with number 44, Bogdanovich for the Jazz. I'm not about to sit up here and struggle to pronounce either one of those guys' first name, but when you look at Bogdanovich for the Utah Jazz, this guy is consistent. He has been consistent since he stepped foot over there, even when he was with the Pacers. He has shown us that he could do it over a long period of time. Go out there and get you 18 to 20 points a night on high percentage shooting, especially from the three ball. Bogdanovich, the Hawks Bogdanovich tend to struggle. He had an up and down season, more lows than he did highs. So I'm going with the guy that's been doing it consistently.
So we're agreeing again, Perk, how boring. But Bojan, to me, is the guy who gets the nod because of his defensive ability. He's sturdy, he's rugged, he competes at that end, and he really fits in well with what they have going on in Utah. You look at Utah as a team that they had health in last year's playoff. Who knows how far they could have gone? Maybe they could have been the surprise team in the Western Conference instead of the Phoenix Suns. And Bogdan had a great playoffs. Actually, I put it this way. When he played great, the Hawks looked great.
Right.
He just doesn't have the consistency that Bojan does.
Yeah, I mean, those
The
Atlanta Hawks, though.
Look at you.
He knows it.
I'm so
He knows
proud.
a thing
I got
or two. He's
notes
been
here.
around the
I've
game.
consulted him several times in this segment.
Right. I will say the Hawks, that young core three, Bogdan is part of that with Trey and John Collins. So, Bogdan, there is high expectations for him there in Atlanta. And speaking of the Atlanta Hawks, ranked right next to each other at 55 and 54, Clint Capella and John Collins. Dave, who is the more valuable Hawk there?
So, Cassie, this is a little counterintuitive, but I think John Collins is the better player, but Clint Capella fits in better with the Hawks right now. He has a clearly defined role. He's playing the dunker spot. He's getting the lobs. He's playing with the rule of verticality at the rim, whereas John Collins actually has more layers to his game. They just haven't found the ways to unlock them all with Nate McMillan's coaching staff. That's not a critique. I think it's just it's more of an opportunity to explore versus Capella. You know what he can do. He knows what he can do, and he's not trying to go out of that lane.
Cassidy, look at Dave Overstein today on here dropping this good gospel. I'm rolling with you. I'm going with Clint Capella. And for the simple fact that Clint Capella, when you look at him, he could just fit in with Trae Young and what the Hawks need. He don't need touches on the low block. Like Dave said, he's going to be a live threat at the basket. But when you look at the defensive side of things, Clint Capella easily could have been in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. A 5-man that could guard the pick and roll however you want him to guard it, meaning switching 1 through 5s or either in the drop coverage. We know how well he protects the basket, but he also is going to go out there and give you 12 to 15 rebounds a night on the average. Sometimes he might end up the game with a triple-double with points, rebounds, and blocks. So I'm going with Clint Capella as well.
Yeah, I mean, Capella may not have been given the more valuable contract this summer. John Collins got a bigger contract, but Clint Capella, I spoke with him last year. And he really talked a lot about the experience he gained as one of the younger players with the Rockets and how he's applied that as the veteran presence with the Hawks. And I think that veteran presence really showed in their run in the playoffs, and he was certainly a big voice in that locker room. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Atlanta Hawks do to follow up quite a run last year in the postseason. Now, coming up, James